Book of Heaven, Volume 15, Part 6. April 28, 1923. Luisa must crush the head of the infernal serpent. The living in the divine will is the complete triumph of the Creator over the creature. The primary purpose of the coming of Jesus upon earth was that the divine will would triumph over the human will. I felt as though immersed in the endless light of the eternal will, and my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, my divinity does not need to operate in order to make its works come out. It only needs to want them. So I want, and I do. The greatest works, the most beautiful, come out upon my mere wanting them. On the other hand, even if the creature wanted them, if she does not work, she does not move, she does nothing. Now, to the one who makes my will her own and lives in it as in her own royal palace, the same power is communicated, as much as it is possible for a creature." Now, while he was saying this, I felt myself being drawn outside of myself, and I found an ugly monster under my feet that was biting itself out of rage. And Jesus, being near me, added, "Just as my virgin mother crushed the head of the infernal serpent, so do I want another virgin, who must be the first possessor of the supreme will, to press that infernal head again, so as to crush it and debilitate it, in such a way as to confine it into hell, that she may have full dominion over it, and it may not dare to approach those who must live in my will. Therefore place your foot on its head and crush it." Made brave, I did it, and it would bite itself more, and so as not to feel my touch, it shut itself up in the darkest abysses. And then Jesus resumed his speaking. "My daughter, do you think that the living in my will is nothing? No, no, on the contrary, it is the all. It is the fulfillment of all sanctities. It is the absolute dominion of oneself, of one's passions, and of one's capital enemies. It is the complete triumph of the Creator over the creature. So if she adheres, and I come to having her live in my will, and she does not want to know her own ever again, I have nothing left to want from the creature, and she has nothing left to give me. All my yearnings are fulfilled, my designs realized. There is nothing left but to delight in each other. It is true that I came upon earth to redeem man, but my primary purpose was that the divine will would triumph over the human will by according these two wills together and making them one, taking the human will into that will from which it had gone out. This was the main offense that my celestial Father received from man, and I was to compensate him for it. Otherwise I would not have given him full satisfaction. But in order to obtain the first purpose, first I had to issue the second, that is, to save him, to extend my hand to him, since he had fallen, to wash him of the mud in which he was lying. How could I say, "Come to live in my will," if he was horrid to look at, and was under the slavery of the infernal enemy? Therefore, after having obtained the second purpose, I want to secure the first one, that my will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and that man, who had gone out of my will, enter into mine once again. And in order to obtain this, I give to this first creature all my merits, all my works and steps, my palpitating heart, my wounds, my blood, the whole of my humanity, to dispose her, to prepare her, to let her enter into my will. In fact, first she must take the complete fruit of my redemption, and then, as though in triumph, enter the possession of the immense sea of my supreme will. I do not want her to enter as a stranger, but as a daughter, not as poor, but as rich, not as ugly, but as beautiful, as if she were another me. Therefore, I want to centralize the whole of my life in you. And while he was saying this, it was as if many seas were coming out of him that poured upon me, and I remained inside of them, sunken, and at the same time a sun beating down with its light, receiving the complete fruit of redemption, in order to be able to give the complete fruit of its will to the creature. It was the Son of the eternal volition that celebrated the entrance of the human will into its own. And Jesus, this divine will of mine, grew within my humanity like a flower that I transplanted from heaven into the true Eden of my terrestrial humanity. It germinated in my blood. It bloomed from my wounds to make of it the greatest gift to the creature. Don't you want to receive it? And I, yes. And he, I want to transplant it into you. Love it and know how to keep it. May 2nd, 1923, when the Fiat Voluntas Tua has its fulfillment on earth as it is in heaven, then shall the complete fulfillment of the second part of the Our Father take place. I felt my poor mind as though lost in the immensity of the eternal volition, and my sweet Jesus, returning to speak about the most holy will of God, told me, "My daughter, oh, how well your acts done in my will harmonize! They harmonize with mine, with those of my beloved Mamma, and one disappears within the other, forming one single act. It seems like heaven on earth, and the earth in heaven, and the echo of one in three, and of three in one, of the sacrosanct Trinity. Oh, how sweet it sounds to our hearing! How it enraptures us! But so much as to capture our will from heaven to earth. And when my Fiat Voluntas Tua has its fulfillment on earth as it is in heaven, then shall the complete fulfillment of the second part of the Our Father take place. That is, give us this day our daily bread. I said, Our Father, in the name of all, I ask you for 3 kinds of bread each day. The bread of your will, or rather more than bread, because if bread is necessary 2 or 3 times a day, this one is necessary at each moment, in all circumstances. Even more, it must be not only bread, but like balsamic air that brings life, the circulation of the divine life in the creature. Father, If this bread of your will is not given, I shall never be able to receive all the fruits of my sacramental life. That is the second bread we ask of you every day. Oh, how my sacramental life feels discomforted, because the bread of your will does not nourish them. On the contrary, it finds the corrupted bread of the human will. Oh, how disgusting it is to me, how I shun it. And even though I go to them, yet I cannot give them the fruits, the goods, the effects, the sanctity, because I do not find our bread in them. And if I give something, it is in small proportion, according to their dispositions, but not all the goods that I contain. And my sacramental life is patiently waiting for man to take the bread of the supreme will, in order to be able to give all the good of my sacramental life. See then how the sacrament of the Eucharist, and not only it, but all the sacraments, left to my church and instituted by me, shall give all the fruits that they contain in complete fulfillment, when our bread, that is the will of God, is done on earth as it is in heaven. Then I asked for the third bread, the material one. How could I say, "Give us this day our bread," in view of the fact that, as man would do our will, what was ours would be his, and so the Father would no longer have to give the bread of his will, the bread of my sacramental life, and the daily bread of natural life, to illegitimate, usurping, evil children, but to legitimate and good children, who would share in the goods of their Father. It is because of this that I said, "Give us our bread." Then shall they eat the blessed bread. Everything shall smile around them, and heaven and earth shall carry the mark of the harmony of their Creator. After this I added, "Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. So charity also shall be perfect. Then shall forgiveness have the mark of heroism, as I had it on the cross. Once man has eaten the bread of my will, as my humanity ate it, then shall the virtues be absorbed into my will and receive the mark of true heroism and of divine virtues. They shall be like many little rivulets that shall gush forth from the bosom of the great sea of my will." And if I added, "And lead us not into temptation," how could God ever lead man into temptation? It was because man is always man, free in himself, since I never take away from him the rights I gave him in creating him. And he, frightened and fearful of himself, tacitly cries out and prays without expressing it with words, "Give us the bread of your will, that we may reject all temptations, and by virtue of this bread deliver us from evil. Amen." See then how all the goods of man find again their connection, the tight bond of the "Let us make man in our image and likeness," the validity of each of his acts, the restitution of the lost goods, as well as the signature and the assurance that his lost happiness, both terrestrial and celestial, is given back to him. Therefore it is so necessary that my will be done on earth as it is in heaven, that I had no other interest, nor did I teach any other prayer but the Our Father. And the Church, faithful executor and depository of my teachings, has it always on her lips, and in every circumstance. And everyone, learned and ignorant, little and great, priests and lay people, kings and subjects, all pray to me that my will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do you not want, then, that my will descend upon earth? But just as redemption had its beginning in a virgin, as I was not conceived in all men in order to redeem them, even though whoever wants it can enter the good of redemption, and each one can receive me in the sacrament for himself alone, in the same way, now my will must have its beginning, possession, growth, and development in one virgin creature. And then whoever disposes himself and wants it shall enter the goods that the living in my will contains. Had I not been conceived in my beloved mamma, redemption would never have come. In the same way, if I do not operate the prodigy of making one soul live in my supreme will, the fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven shall not take place in the human generations. May 5th, 1923. As many times as the soul enters into the divine will, so many ways does she open between Creator and creatures. Finding myself in my usual state, I felt drawn outside of myself, but I could not see the azure heavens, nor the sun of our horizon, but a different heaven, all of gold, studded with stars of various colors, more refulgent than sun. I felt drawn toward up high, and as this heaven opened before me, I found myself in front of a most pure light. Before this light, sinking into it, I called all human intelligences into my intelligence. From the moment when Adam, by withdrawing from the divine will, had began to break the union of his intelligence with that of his Creator, up to the last man who shall exist upon earth, and I tried to give to my God all the honor, the glory, the submission, and so forth, of all created intelligences. And I did the same for all my other senses, calling all those of the other creatures into mine. All this, always in his lovable will, in which everything can be found, from which nothing can escape, even things that may not exist at the present moment, and in which all can be done. While I was doing this, a voice came out from within the immensity of that light, saying, "As many times as the soul enters into the divine will, in order to pray, operate, love, and so forth, so many ways does she open between Creator and creatures. And the divinity, in seeing that the creature is making her way to go to him, opens his ways in order to meet his creature. In this encounter, she copies the virtues of her Creator, absorbs ever new divine life into herself, penetrates more deeply into the eternal secrets of the Supreme Volition, and everything she does is no longer human in her, but divine. This divine operating forms within her a golden heaven, where the divinity strolls, delighting in finding his own operating in the creature, awaiting the creature in order to receive her divine acts, and therefore open more ways for her within his divinity. And he keeps repeating with great love, "Behold, here is how, in my will, the creature comes closer to my likeness, accomplishes my designs, fulfills the purpose of creation." And while hearing this, I found myself inside myself. May 8th, 1923. Luisa must reach the beginning. Only the divine will can place in safety and keep with jealousy all the goods that God wants to give to the creature. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself. I seemed to be covering a very long way, on which I encountered many people. Some were horrifying to look at. Some looked like incarnate demons. Very few were the good. That way was so long that it would never end, and I, tired, wanted to go back into myself. But someone who was near me prevented me from doing that, telling me, "Move forward, keep going. You must reach the beginning, and in order to get there, you must go through all generations. You must have them all under your eyes to bring them to your Creator. Your beginning is God, and you must reach that point of eternity when the Eternal One created man, in order to receive all the bonds of creation and to retie all the harmonies that can exist between Creator and creature. So a supreme force made me go forward, and I was forced to see the evils of the earth and those that shall come, unfortunately horrifying. Then after this I found my sweet Jesus, and tired, I threw myself into his arms, telling him, "My love, what a long way I had to go through. It seemed like centuries without seeing you, and without finding he who forms my life." And Jesus, all love, "Ah, yes, my daughter, rest in my arms. Come into your beginning, from which you came out. I too was anxiously awaiting you, to receive from you, in my will, everything that creation owes me, and to give it to you, in my same will, all that I must give to the whole creation. My will alone can place in safety and keep with jealousy all the goods that I want to give to the creature. Outside of my will, my goods are always in danger and poorly kept, while in it I abound, and I give to the one what I should give to all. Therefore I want to bind all creation in you. I want to place you in the original point of the creation of man. It is my usual way to deal one-on-one with one creature alone, what I want to give her and what I want from her. And then from her I let goods derive for others. Ah, my daughter, I had created man like a flower that was to grow, acquire color and fragrance in my very divinity. By withdrawing from my will, it happened to him as to a flower that is snatched away from a plant. As long as it remains in the plant, the flower is beautiful, lively in its color and fragrant in its perfume. Once it is snatched away from the plant, it withers, it fades, it becomes ugly, and reaches the point of giving off a bad odor. What a lot this was for him, and what a sorrow for me, who with so much love wanted to grow this flower in my divinity, to delight and amuse myself with him. Now, by my omnipotence, I want this detached flower to bloom again, by transplanting it once again into the womb of my divinity. But I want a soul who would want to live in the womb of my volition. She shall be the seed that she shall lend to me, and my will shall do all the rest. In this way, my delights of creation shall come back. I shall amuse myself with this mystical flower, and I shall be repaid for creation. May 18th, 1923. How difficult it is to find a soul who wants to suffer. The executioners of souls present in the church. I was feeling all afflicted, and almost without my sweet Jesus. What hard martyrdom is his privation! Martyrdom without hope to assault heaven like the martyrs do, which renders their every suffering sweet. His privation instead is martyrdom that disunites, that burns, that cuts, and that opens an abyss of separation between the soul and God. A martyrdom that, instead of sweetening suffering, embitters it, intoxicates it, in such a way that while the soul feels herself dying, death itself runs away from her. Oh God, what pain! Now, while I was in the immense abyss of the privation of my Jesus, as he just barely moved in my interior, I said to him, "Ah, my Jesus, you don't love me anymore." And he, not paying attention to me, made himself seen, all afflicted, as though holding something black in his hand, that he was about to throw over the creatures. Then he took my heart in his hands, squeezed it tightly, pierced it through, and my heart anxiously awaited his pains as refreshment and balm for the pains suffered because of his privation. Oh, how I feared that he might cease to let me suffer, plunging me once again into the abyss of his separation. And then after this he said to me, "My daughter, I do not pay attention to words, but to facts. Do you think it is easy to find a soul who really wants to suffer? Oh, how hard it is. With words, there are some who want to suffer, but with facts, they run away when a sorrow oppresses them, or other pains surround them. Oh, how they would rather free themselves. And I remain always the Jesus, isolated in the pains. This is why, when I find a soul who does not shun suffering and wants to keep me company in my pains, even more she waits and waits for me to bring her the bread of suffering. This gives me the delirium of love, and makes me reach the point of doing follies, and of abounding so much with this soul as to astonish heaven and earth. Do you think it was something indifferent over my heart that loves so much, that while you were without me, you were waiting for me, for nothing else but to receive from me my bitter pains?" But while he was saying this, He made me feel that the most holy sacrament was passing by in the street, and he gave a stronger squeeze to my heart. And I, my Jesus, what is going on? Where are you going? And who is carrying you? And he, all sad, I am going to a sick person, and I am carried by an executioner of souls. And I, frightened, Jesus, what are you saying? What? Your ministers, executioners of souls? And he, and how many executioners of souls there are in my church. There are executioners attached to interests, who make a slaughter of souls, and who, with their example, instead of rendering souls detached from all that is earth, engulf them even more. There are the immodest ones, who instead of purifying souls, disfigure them. There are executioners of the past times, dedicated to pleasures, to strolls, and other things, who instead of rendering souls recollected, and infusing in them love for prayer and retreat, distract them. These are all slaughters of souls. How much pain does my heart not feel in seeing that the very ones who were to help and sanctify souls are the cause of their ruin. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 15, Part 6. Fiat.